Every day, communities living on the margins of South Africa's urban hubs commute to and from work, using the limited forms of public transport available to them. But due to taxi wars that have killed hundreds of people, disrupted livelihoods, and destroyed millions of rands in infrastructure, commuters are again caught in the middle of a madness not of their making. It never rains, but it pours in parts of Cape Town, still in the midst of the COVID pandemic and restricted by the lockdown. In the past year, struggling communities living on the outskirts of the city have been bearing the heaviest brunt. Yet every day, thousands continue to commute to work in affluent suburbs that are a world apart.
The people that lives in communities like townships, for instance, it's quite hard for them to get their own private cars because they can afford to have one. So for them to use their public transport, it's something that they rely on.
Tawanda Sitoli is a carpenter. To survive, he also gets piece jobs as a handyman, sometimes having to travel up to 2 to 3 hours a day. But these days, taking public transport is fraught with risk.
Because you can hear that drivers are being shot in places as they drive their taxis or bus drivers.
Since the beginning of 2021, at least 83 people have died in the violent taxi wars currently gripping Cape Town. A driver for Golden Arrow Bus was shot in the face last week, bringing the bus service to a halt.
We usually take buses at the Nyanga police station, but today, unfortunately, we couldn't stand there longer. The bus drivers decided that they're going to take us to the nearest buses so that we can travel safely and stuff. Since this morning in Nyanga terminus, there was an incident around 7, 8.
I'm very scared, but I can't stay at home because no work, no pay.
Previously in Langa, 2 men were arrested and charged with attempted murder after allegedly shooting at vehicles from the taxi rank. And commuters have not been spared, like 29-year-old Toba Ntandane and his 23-year-old cousin Nsekelele Miyeki. 21-year-old Okushla James was also gunned down as she was about to board the taxi.
She was not even in that taxi, but she stopped the taxi because she wants to enter to go into mall. And then they started to shoot when he was entering the taxi. That's why you will find out her body was laying outside the taxi because she was not actually in.
Their child was caught with a bullet, and the reports are that these people are using heavy artillery, like automatic rifles, among civilians. In the main, the conflict is about routes and the illegal operators in the system, and at the same time, as government, we are coming in to regulate, and that's what is important.
But there is nothing new about this mayhem in South Africa. It is only the names of the victims that have changed in an ongoing conflict that has again turned the streets of our cities into war zones. And Cape Town is again the flashpoint of an increasingly violent competition for dominance of the taxi routes. This time, the conflict is between the Cape Amalgamated Taxi Association, or CATA, and the Congress of Democratic Taxi Associations, or CODETA.
There is a conflict around the Paarl Bellville route and who the ownership of 6 permits is between, CATA or CODETA, and whether the association owns the permits or the individual license holder who move between them are the bodies. I think what is at play here, however, is something more sinister, and that is after having dismantled much of the rail industry, certain role players in the taxi industry are now trying to destroy Golden Arrow buses. Very little taxi activity but of those two associations around the city, although many other associations are running from various ranks in the city. And this, of course, has put more pressure on the buses. And I fear that if the Taxi Association has an exclusive monopoly on public transport, the consequences for commuters and the city will be terrible.
One thing that has not been very successful in the industry is negotiating routes. Force has always been used to find its way in terms of monopolizing routes. Transformation of the industry, it requires that ability to negotiate. One thing that is missing in the industry is that angle, ability to kind of bring key stakeholders to negotiate and find a solution without the use of violence.
Arbitration talks are underway between transport authorities and taxi associations, but the violence has continued, further paralysing the transport system and sabotaging the fragile COVID economy. Consequently, the National Minister of Transport and his provincial counterpart decided to shut down the Bokweni, Paarl and Bellville routes for the next 2 months.
We have an obligation as leaders in this industry to make sure that our commuters remain our priority and that we keep our commuters safe and that innocent bystanders can no longer pay the price of internal conflict because of certain routes.
While the taxi discussions are still going on, I've engaged with rail as well as with the bus transport systems and companies. And being here today, we are seeing how can we help add extra support, making sure that our bus drivers are safe. At the end of the day, to make sure that our citizens are safer. The customers must be safe and be able to move, because the no taxis in the system are creating economic sabotage for our people.
Brutal killings in broad daylight have come to define taxi violence in South Africa.
In 2019, Special Assignment conducted an exclusive investigation into taxi violence.
We traveled to Amersfoort in Mpumalanga, where taxi tensions have escalated following a multi-million rand transport tender. Several lives have been lost, and the role of state officials is also brought into question.
The taxi industry has become synonymous with mayhem.
Taxi associations in the Western Cape have begun a strike, leaving commuters stranded. Management of Golden Arrow bus services has confirmed that its buses are operating despite some being pelted with stones and one being set alight in Delft on the Cape Flats.
In recent years, there have been a litany of flare-ups countrywide, destabilising transport, the economy and leaving commuters stranded. The violence flares up, flares down, with no sustainable solution in sight and no apparent proactive plans to anticipate or quell the recurring threats of violence.
Because the threat is known. It's not like we're dealing with something that is unknown. A problem like this will not talk to one problem, unfortunately. It will talk to a multiple kind of problems. It will be a problem of leadership. It will be a problem of lack of a plan. It will be a problem of lack of collaboration between the city and the national government or the provincial government. It will be a combination of many other things, so that then the deployment of resources is such that the resources are deployed precisely and coordinated in a manner that deals with the problem.
South Africa's transport system is severely challenged. Our three modes of transport are via our train services, our bus services and the taxi industry. 66 million South Africans use these forms of transport, with 9 million commuters using the buses on a daily basis, 2 million using the train service, and 15 million using the minibus taxi industry. Most train lines are practically non-functional due to vandalism, and the modernised MyCity bus doesn't yet reach all areas of Cape Town. Golden Arrow buses and taxis therefore provide the main source for transport for township commuters, with the taxi industry getting the lion's share.
The taxi industry holds about more than 60% of the road-based transport market. But we don't get any subsidies. Golden Arrow is getting about 80 million a month subsidy.
Inevitably, there's stiff competition for customers. The taxi industry is dominated by its largest union, the South African National Taxi Council, or SANTACO.
Our ultimate role is just to lobby government and into looking at, like with the subsidies, lobby government to look at the problems in the industry and then be a mouthpiece for our members.
But the so-called engine behind the nation is now being seen by the authorities as the vehicle behind the violence.
At the moment, membership of them is required to get an operating permit, so you are entrenching them in this process as a gatekeeper and unfortunately also as organised crime syndicates to some extent, and this can't carry on, so they must be removed from the legislation, and a relationship directly between the applicants and the taxi owners and the regulatory authority must be established, as we do with all kinds of other permits.
The permits get issued by the Department of Transport, by the regulatory entity. And the support for that permit is issued by the city. They are the people that are supporting the applications for permits. SANTACO don't have any input or any lobbying power when it comes to the issuing of permits.
The taxi industry is also a self-regulating kind of industry. They regulate their own, the way that they operate. Obviously, the city also plays a role in terms of issuing of permits and all those things. But whenever there's a conflict in terms of routes or anything that is likely to destabilize the functioning of the industry, then you need a much more bigger platform created for purpose of negotiating.
But the havoc wreaked by the wars have now become an urgent issue of public safety and policing.
We have a lot of people that are being killed. We have a lot of public concerns of public safety.
SANTACO don't have any statutory powers, meaning that the statutory powers is with government. They are the people issuing permits. They are the people that can take that permits back, or Section 78, that permit from the members. They are the people that got the law enforcement. We don't do law enforcement. That is in their domain to do. There's actually nothing that we can do. We can only suspend a member from being part of the SANTACO structure, but that doesn't stop him from being an operator.
So it moves away from SANTACO. SANTACO can do something. These are their members. But ultimately, the responsibility lies with the state to provide public safety and security. If the rule of law has to be maintained in the industry, the state needs to be seen to be making sure that people are arrested and the people are prosecuted. The public feels safe when they use public transport.
But again, law enforcement has come under fire for being hopelessly unprepared.
Public order policing is an institution that is being rebuilt. It was completely diminished during the period of Commissioner Selebe. when he dismantled public order and deployed public order personnel to police stations. This capability now is being rebuilt, but unfortunately, it is not coping with the extent of the problem. In many cases, because it is a specialized area of policing, it is often seen as reactive.
And the industry stands accused of being a hotbed of organized crime.
There are potential or possibilities of syndicates operating, or use of gangs and syndicates being deployed to cause problems. You deal with the source of the problem, but then you need that capability to identify exactly where the source is. Also, allegations of police being involved in the industry, either as taxi operators or as protectors of kingpins. And if these allegations are true, then you need to deal with the police officers to be involved in these kind of syndicates and propelling this violence to continue.
The history of the South African taxi industry is a complex journey, with its legacy often bathed in blood. During the Truth and Reconciliation hearings of 1996, taxi violence was included in the hearings, along with third force activities and urban bombings aimed at destabilizing the transition to democracy. Hundreds of lives were lost in attacks on taxis and passengers, particularly during the last years of apartheid. But the industry also has a heroic history, emerging in the wake of the apartheid government's policy of economic deregulation, defying apartheid laws and strict regulations that were part of the state's machinery to further oppress and marginalize black South Africans. Although it has come a long way, it has been no easy ride. Its contribution to employment and to South Africa's economy are substantial, but it has also become a law unto itself, unregulated and unaccountable.
It's an industry that plays a very important role, but it's an industry when there's public safety concerns. There need to be a way, government need to find a way of stabilizing the industry.
The persistence of taxi wars have forced the government to intervene in the industry.
So if it means government playing a much more central role in transforming the industry, in deregulating the industry, providing subsidies, professionalizing the industry, so be it, because it's an industry that is struggling to self-regulate.
Because it was promised to us that the subsidy will be rolled out by April, and we're almost in August already, and there's no word about when the subsidy is going to, if it's ever going to materialize. There's no proper feedback onto what is the delays about it.
Arbitration talks began today and are expected to conclude by the end of the week, but there is no clear resolution in sight.
All the issues must be looked at and not just looked at the one route, because they feel that that is not going to stem the violence if we're only going to solve that issue, because next week it's going to be another issue. And at that point they decided that they want to withdraw from the discussion, and they feel that they would rather wait for the outcome of the arbitration process.
There are fears that more violence will ensue.
It is one of the things that we're afraid of with the closing down of the ranks, that it's going to fuel the fire. Some people are now operating and others is not operating. And then end of the day, sometimes it's not the operators that's the problem, because you got drivers out there that's not working for 3 weeks, 4 weeks. Now they're taking the law into their own hands, and is troubling the other drivers that's operating, and that is where violence stems from.
And now that the army has been deployed on high alert to back up the presence of police along the highly contested minibus taxi route between Paarl and Bellville.
But we're relying so much on the military that it now begins to say something about the capability of the police and its ability to fulfill its constitutional mandate. Military should be the last resort when there's public disorder, when it is very clear that police are not able to bring about public order. It's very clear now that we don't have a capable police organization that is able to protect its citizens.
Meanwhile, commuters struggle to get to work. The COVID vaccine rollout has been disrupted, and schools are appealing to the taxi industry to make peace before children get further caught in the crossfire.
It is our problem to resolve, and we are calling a policy conference soon, or we're planning to. There is a document that we're working on that we want all the reasons to accept, and that is to do with route invasion, floor crossing, the influx of new members. It's putting a lot of pressure on the industry, and we've got a draft document that we want to present to the rest of the Santaco, the province, but we first need to deal with this violence before we can get there.
That will entail holding accountable those who are taking the economy hostage and the determination of all role players to prevent the country from becoming further collateral damage in a seemingly endless war.